Thank you, Felicia. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's class, which is the Winsor Newton Strawberries. My name is Tim DePack, and I'm from Winsor Newton, and I'll be your moderator for today's class. I'm being joined by Shealeen Louise, who will be your artist instructor for today's class. And Shealeen will be taking you through today's class by providing you information about the products being used and showing you how to perform some of her favorite watercolor painting techniques, all while creating these bright red, juicy, and sweet strawberries using the Winsor Newton Cotman Watercolor paints. There is a sketch that was available prior to the class, which I'm going to hit the button in the chat right now for those of you who need that link. And on completion of this class, you'll be sent a survey in your email. Please let us know what you thought about the class, how did we do, and if there's any particular topics that you'd like to see Shealeen perform in the future. Please feel free to follow along and paint with Shealeen or sit back and relax and enjoy the class. With that being said, I'm going to pass over to Shealeen.
All right, hello everybody, welcome. So yes, today we're going to be painting this strawberries watercolor. You can see that there. Looking forward to this class. I think it's going to be a really good class, whether you're intermediate or more of a beginner. So apologies ahead of time. I am just getting over being sick for a couple of weeks. So you know how you feel fine and then suddenly when you need to talk, your throat gets really tickly. That's like how I feel right now. I'm like, keep it together. But if I mute myself, just know I'm probably coughing or something. So let's get started. We're going to talk through some supplies and then we're going to sketch this together in real time. If you've sketched ahead of time, that's awesome. But okay, so supplies here, let's see. I have a few different colors. We're going to use cadmium red, lemon yellow, sap green, Veridian green, and Alizarin crimson, which is going to be the star of the show today. So I'm using all tube paints. If you're using pan paints, that's going to work just as well. I am using 3 different paintbrush sizes. I have a 10, a 6, and a 2, which I might refer to them as just small, medium, and large. My mom took this class, she took my last class through Michael's, and she recommended that I say that next time. So I'm going to try that, but just so you know, it's a 10, a 6, and a 2. I have a palette here for mixing. I have a pencil for drawing, and then we're going to use something a little bit different today. We're going to use some ink. Hopefully you saw that on the supplies list. And if you didn't, it's okay. Just it's going to be fine. But if you have ink, grab that. If you don't have that, maybe you have gouache. And gouache would actually work just as well. Basically, what we want is we want to be able to add white to the top of our pink strawberries. So that's what I'm using. I'm using white ink today. But like I said, if you don't have it, whatever, it's fine. It's still going to turn out great. So we're going to start by sketching this out together. Okay, so here we go. Let's just take a look at this sketch really quick. Just notice the shape of the leaves, kind of jagged, but they're also kind of the shape of the strawberries. Notice that? How they're kind of, at least these two look pretty similar. So what I'm going to start by doing is just kind of getting the placement of the stem. Kind of a loose line here. We got kind of this heart-shaped leaf over here. I always like to just kind of get the rough shape before I commit to anything, you know, too strong. Got a leaf over here to the side. And then some strawberries here. So we have a largest strawberry here at the bottom. We have a medium-sized strawberry just here to the left. And then I have this little teeny guy right here. All right, so I'm going to start committing to some of my lines because I feel like this placement all feels good. The composition feels balanced. So what I'm going to do is for my large leaf, I'm not going to draw all these little jagged lines. I'm actually going to accentuate those jagged edges with my paints. So for right now, that's kind of the shape that's plenty for me right now. Okay. This leaf over here on the top, notice how it has kind of this turn in it. So it's kind of has this top kind of ruffled part, a line just underneath it, and then it has this back side. Let's go ahead and draw this flower. It's just a very, very simple little flower, isn't it? Just a little 5-petal flower. Probably one of the easiest flowers I've ever taught for one of my classes. It's got a stem that connects to this main stem. And then let's go ahead and draw these veins. So start with your center vein, connect it from the very top all the way down to the bottom. And then we have veins reaching out to the left and the right. All right, I'm going to move on to this leaf right here. So center vein, and then veins reaching out to the right and left. Okay, strawberry time. So let me go ahead and make sure my stems are where I want them to be. And so what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to start by drawing the leaves that are just at the top. I'm not drawing them exactly like my sketch. These are, they don't need to be too perfect. And then I'm going to adjust my little tiny strawberry hair just here, just a little bit. It's always good to do this, do this sketch ahead of time. I definitely would recommend if you take more of my classes in the future, it's nice to just have the sketch prepared ahead of time. That way you really have the margin to, adjust little things. If a leaf feels like it's, too far down, you can bring it up a little bit. Okay, so that feels pretty good to me. I think I'm just going to go with it there. Actually, one thing I will tweak. This leaf right here feels like it's a little bit too high. And this is what happens when you're sketching freehand. So I'm going to redraw that one. And then draw that backside. All right. Let me erase that a little bit better. Okay, so I'm ready to get started. So I'm going to use my large brush, my size 10 brush. And I'm going to get a mixture going here on my palette. And I'm going to get a mixture of sap green and lemon yellow. There's some little coughs in the background. My husband and son, we all got sick, so we're in recuperation mode. Is that the right word? Okay, so I want this to be a nice kind of 50-50 sap green, lemon yellow mixture here. And it can be a little more on the watery side, that's fine. I want this color to really flow. So your palette, make sure this color is just flows super easily. I don't want it to be too syrupy. So make sure there's a good amount of water in there. And I'm actually going to pull my sketch out of frame. I'll hold this up for you real quick. I got a couple sketchy lines in there, and I'm actually not practicing what I preach. I usually am telling you to make sure that you always have all those extra sketchy lines taken out. I'll do that real quick before I start adding paint to it. Because once you add paint to your paper with pencil on it, it does start to lock that pencil in there. And sometimes despite your best efforts, you're still going to see a little bit of pencil in there. So the less sketches you have, the better. Okay, so go ahead and take your mixture here of sap green, lemon yellow, and I'm using my large brush. And you can use a medium brush here if you want to. You definitely don't have to use this one. Whatever brush you're using, make sure it has a really nice point. Okay, if your brush looks all fanned at the end, if it looks more like a mop than a paintbrush, hold on, let me close this window. Got some barking dogs out there. So make sure you have a nice point because some of this work we're going to do here is a little bit more on the detailed side. So I'm going to go ahead and start by painting these stems. And I'm going to go ahead and paint all of my leaves, all the same color. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, remember I told you that I'm going to use the paint to really start to accentuate those little jagged edges. So this is where I want you to start thinking about that. So for this large leaf, for example, what I'm going to do is kind of start by just putting down the brush tip and then pushing down and pulling it back. And that's going to help create that little jagged edge there. And I'll hold that up for you to see. I'm just going to do that on this entire leaf. I like to use a large brush here because it does cover more ground a little more quickly. Something you can do here is just kind of don't come right up to that flower. Maybe you want to use a smaller brush to really carefully work around that flower. And that's something that just takes time. You got to learn to be intuitive with, what brush is the best brush for whatever task you're working on. And the more you paint, the more comfortable you'll be with that process, and the more you'll know when to switch and when to upsize and when to downsize. So here I might switch to the medium, the size 6 brush. And then I can just paint around that flower just a little bit more easily. So there you have it. See how that kind of created that ruffled edge for that leaf without having to do too much work, huh? So we're going to do the same thing on this leaf here. So a little bit of sap green and a little bit of lemon yellow, keeping that mixture going here. Very watery. And then also I'm just going to make sure to draw this little stem connecting to that flower. And then this stem here. So let's do that same technique. Another way you could do it, instead of starting on the edge, like the sharp edge, and then coming back towards the center, you could start in the center, reach outward, and then kind of lift your brush there at the end. And you'll get that same effect. And so the nice thing about using a round brush is that you can do that kind of stuff where you can drop a lot of water. Look, I'm just putting a ton of paint down and then I lift, and then it gives me that kind of toothed edge of that leaf. And I find that the quicker I work here, the more I end up liking it. I think if I go too slowly here, they all look exactly the same, and then it looks maybe a little too uniform. So don't be afraid to to move a little bit more quickly than you feel comfortable with here. I'm going to drop just a little bit more while this is still wet. And I'm actually still using my large brush here. I like to use this one. This is actually a really nice, this one has a really nice tip, so I'm able to really get those nice little edges. Okay, taking inventory real quick. Those leaves still good. So I'm going to go down to this bottom area here. Keep that mixture going. This is 50-50, sap green, lemon yellow. And let's go ahead and start by going, let's get the leaves on the top of these strawberries. You might want to use your smallest brush here. And I'll go ahead and use my small brush here for these stems. Just a little brush caretaking tip here. Never leave your brushes like this, just in the water. What that does is it loosens the glue that's up inside of here. It loosens that glue, and then it's also going to slowly bend that tip so that it's kind of, you'll lose that tip is what I'm trying to say. It's going to get just a little bit bent at the end, and it's going to make it a little bit splayed. And one of the best ways to keep your tips, intact for as long as you can is just don't leave them in water. Make sure you rinse them after you use them. And then I always just like to store them just, if I'm not using it, it's flat. And the bristles are not touching anything, right? They're just I'm just letting them dry. And I actually don't use any, I don't really use any cleaners for my brushes. They sell, there's soaps you can buy for watercolor brushes, but it's pretty rare that I'll use them. Usually I find that just a little bit of water, clean water is really great for cleaning watercolor brushes. All right. So that feels good there. Feels like a nice even green layer. So now what I want to do is I want to grab just a little bit of that lemon yellow. So I want to grab just a little bit more of the lemon yellow. So we have that same mix, we have that mixture of sap green and lemon yellow. Just grab a little bit more of the yellow. And then I want you to paint your entire strawberry, the smallest one here, this mixture that is a little bit heavier on the yellow side. And that just makes it look like it's just this little teeny unripe strawberry that's just getting going. But I don't want it to be the same color as the leaves or the stems. I want it to be a little bit more yellow. So just grab a little bit more yellow. And then I also want to paint this stamen, the center of this little flower here. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to use my large brush again, and I'm going to mix not sap green, I'm going to mix alizarin crimson and cadmium red. So I found that for strawberries, alizarin crimson was maybe a little bit too pink, and cadmium red right here was a little bit too much of a tomato red. So I found that when I mixed those two together, it gave me the perfect strawberry color. So we're going to use both of them. So I want you to mix 50-50 alizarin crimson and cadmium red. So I'm going to activate these colors. You can tell I was painting earlier today. I did another little mini painting. This has been my new thing before classes. I like to just do a small version of it just to make sure I remember how to do it. And yeah, it's fun. I like to do little paintings. All right, guys, so 50-50 here. Alizarin crimson and cadmium red.
This is where everybody, I think, is going to start to get.
Is where everybody
I
what?
want strawberries.
Oh my gosh, I know, right? I have a big bag of frozen
As soon as you
strawberries right
see
now.
that there, that bright red sticking out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting
Yeah.
for it.
All right, so let's make sure this mixture is nice and watery, just like this mixture for the green leaves. We're going to do kind of that same technique of doing a really smooth layer that's very watery, and then we're going to slowly build up some color. So again, you might want to use a smaller brush here for going around the little leaves here. My brush has a nice point, so I'm just gonna, I think I might just, well, we'll see. I'm at least gonna cover the main part of these strawberries with this larger size. It's a little bit too heavy with color, so I'm just adding a little bit more water to this. Yeah, I will use a smaller brush here actually. So I'm switching to my small brush, size 2. And I'm just going to real carefully work this brush into, these little white spots in between these leaves. So work that color in there. You got to use the right size brush for this. I actually think that even though this brush has a nice point, I think it's just a little bit too big for this kind of finesse work. You could do it, but it's going to end up just looking a little bit more loose. All right, same thing on our big strawberry. Love a big brush for just covering a lot of ground really quickly. Holds a bunch of water, holds a bunch of paint. All right, then I'm switching to my small brush. Work around those little leaves really carefully. Okay, so I want those to dry now. And actually, real quick, while this is still wet, what I want to do is just drop a little bit of that color just around the outer edge. We're going to try and make sure to keep the center of our strawberries light and just make the outer edge a little bit darker. Just up here in the midst of these leaves, you can drop a little bit more of that darker mixture. Okay, and then I'm going to let all that dry. So I'm going to rinse off my brushes. And I'm going to use my medium-sized brush, the size 6. And I'm going to get a new mixture of green going. So I'm going to mix some sap green and some Veridian green. And that Veridian is just going to help add a little bit of coolness because it's kind of more of a blue-green. And I just like to have a little bit of variety, in all my colors. I don't want it to just be like sap green, that's it. These are sap green leaves. I want there to be, a little more nuance. So right now we have lemon yellow and we have sap green. Now we're about to add a little bit of Veridian green. So we have that spectrum of very cool or very warm, yellow, all the way over to Veridian green, which is very warm. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just go ahead and drop this Veridian green on those paint veins, or sorry, on those leaf veins that we drew earlier. So go ahead and just draw them in there. Does not need to look perfect. And then I'm going to use my larger brush and I'm going to clean it off in this cleanish water, It's getting a little bit murky, but that's okay. And I'm going to use that damp, clean brush. And I'm going to smooth that color. So I'm just kind of creating some feathery bits of this darker, cooler color. And I'm not trying to cover everything here. Like I definitely still want there to be lighter bits in there. And I'll do the same thing on this one. Actually, I'm going to drop a little bit more right there. Do the same thing over here. Sap green and Veridian green.
Everything is so bright and just popping off the watercolor paper right now.
It honestly looks even brighter where I'm at, looking at it on
Yeah.
my computer versus, in person. I'm sure everybody who's painting along feels the same way. These are definitely some very vibrant colors. I think not using yellow ochre and burnt sienna, which I typically use those two colors quite often. I think not using those two is helping to keep it very vibrant. I generally tend to desaturate and kind of make my paintings a little more earthy toned by mixing more of those like brown tones, but we're not doing that today, so it's going to look a little different. So just mixing that or dropping a little bit more of that green mixture in. And let's go ahead and paint the bottom side of this leaf up here. So notice how I'm giving it kind of that little kind of tapered toothed edge there. And all you got to do is just do little lines, go to the end of your brush, just that little brush point. I think this leaf is looking a little bit light, so I'm going to drop in a bit more. And I'm using my medium brush here. And then I'll use my large brush to smooth that out. Okay. One more thing I want to do is actually want to add a little bit of that same color to a few of these, the tips of that leaf. And that actually feels really nice. I like the way that feels. So I'm trying not to cover them entirely, but I do think that just adding that little dash right where those, toothed edges of those leaves are, that feels really nice. And I'll do a little bit of the same over here. It helps me to squint at it too. When I squint at my painting, it helps me to see less detail and just see the painting as a whole and see where I might want to add a little bit more of a darker value. It's a great trick. I use that really, really frequently. So let's do a little bit up here at the top. Just a tiny bit. We'll just do a few little dashes. And I think I'll let the leaves dry for now. And I'm going to move over to the stems really quick. So that same mixture, Veridian green, sap green. Let's go ahead and deepen these stems just a bit. So I'm just going to go and deepen all the stems connecting the leaves. And then I want to kind of try and stay on the left side I don't want to completely cover that stem. So you can see there's still a little bit of a light green, and it kind of looks like maybe that's the sun shining on the right side of the stem. One more down here at the bottom. Okay, so now clean off your brush, your large brush, your medium brush, whatever ones you were using. And we're going to go back to the red. So let's go and get a really strong mixture of sap green, or sorry, cadmium red and alizarin crimson. You do not want to just cover your, your strawberries with green. That won't look good. You know, it's another aspect of this painting that really does help it to just pop, is that the red and green are complementary colors. So they're opposite sides of the color wheel, and it really helps them to just make each other really vibrant and make each other really stand out. You can see we got a ways to go on this one, huh? I think we can get there. So I'm getting a really strong mixture going here. It takes a second to really build up a strong color. I have to really kind of activate that color just so I have a lot of it. So I'm like really trying to work these bristles into this color. Okay. So once you have a really strong mixture ready to go and a lot of color, because we're going to use a lot here, I'll just leave that brush there. I'm going to use my medium brush that's clean, and I am going to just wet the surface of both of my strawberries with just water. And so what we're about to do is called a wet on wet technique. And so what we're going to do is we're going to let this wet watercolor paper help us smooth out that color. So make sure the whole surface of it is covered in water. As best you can tell. It's kind of hard to tell on mine right now. I can't see if there's spots that I missed, but I think we're pretty good. All right, and then once you have those covered, so we're gonna do this wet on wet technique. So wet on wet. And then what I'm going to do is just drop this color on the outer edge. Now I'm using my large brush. You can use your medium brush here, whatever one you feel the most comfortable with. I want you to drop a little bit around the leaves carefully. I'll use my small brush here to just kind of carefully guide that color where I want it to go without, covering up. I don't want to cover up these leaves accidentally with this really strong mixture of red. And then let's do the same thing over here. It's already starting to look a lot more two-dimensional, three-dimensional, whatever. It's got a lot more dimension now. And the reason is that the outer edge is dark and the center is light, which creates the impression of a round shape. I'm using my small brush here to work that color around those leaves carefully. Okay, now what I want to do is use the tip of your brush, and I want you to just start dabbing, kind of like along that edge. And what I want to do is I really want to create like a very soft gradient from the dark red to the light pink here. And I want this strawberry to just have a little bit more texture to it. So dabbing it versus just brushing it on It's going to help us to get a little bit more texture. And I will hold this up for you in just a second. I'm going to switch to my small brush, just a clean brush, and I'm going to just pull that color inwards just a little bit. I'm kind of dabbing, kind of scratching. I really want to let the watercolor kind of do its thing here. So I want there to be a little bit of bleed and a little bit of natural water movement in these strawberries. So I'll hold this one up for you. So you'll notice there's a little bit of texture to that strawberry. Looks a little bit better than I think it looks a little better than this one right now. So we're gonna do that same technique here. So just start dropping a little bit of dashes of this red mixture right along that really dark red in that center lighter area. And you definitely want to make sure that your surface is staying wet here. So if you need to add a little bit of water to that, that's totally fine. And I'm finding that this brush has a little bit too much red in it. So I'm going to rinse it off just a little bit in my water. So now it has just a little bit more of a diluted mixture. Just a little bit lighter red. Another thing you could do, you could just blot it on your paper towel so that there's not as much paint in those bristles. And then you're going to find that you have a lighter red mixture to work with. So I'm going to just kind of keep working. I'll work my way in here just a little bit more. And as it starts to dry, you're going to find that some of that detail is lost. It's going to start kind of bleeding, which is good because I don't want it to be too textured. I really want the water to kind of help smooth it. So there's somewhere in between too textured and too smooth. And I'll know it when I see it. I'm going to use my small brush here, and I'm going to use that brush to just kind of help me smooth out some of that busyness. I want it to look a little bit smoother. Okay.
Hey, Tim.
Yeah, I see that it looks like we lost Shealeen there for a minute.
Hey, Tim, am I still there?
Yes.
There we go. Okay.
Give me one quick second here. Let me find your name, Shealeen, so I can bring back your other camera. And we do apologize for the technical issues. Of course, everybody's working from home now lately. Shealeen, we can still see you drawing. It's just that it's sideways for us.
.45-degree angle, okay. Okay, now I want to make sure you guys can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Hopefully we can run. Yes, okay, cool. All right, well, I'm going to jump right back into it, okay? So like I think the last thing I was saying is I wanted you to really make sure to focus on keeping the centers light and keeping the outer edges dark, okay? So I'm going to drop a little bit more of alizarin crimson into this outer edge because alizarin crimson is a really, really rich dark red color. So that's going to help us really get that drama on those outer edges. So go ahead and just, while it's still kind of wet, while it's still, you know, easy to kind of drop some color and let it bleed a little bit, drop that red in there, okay? I'll do the same over here. And I'm using my small brush for this. I have a little bit more control.
Shealeen, when you get a chance, can you hold that up to the camera more so the people that as it pours, we can really see what happened?
And I'll drop a little bit here amidst these leaves. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry and I'm going to go back to my leaves. So I always work in layers here. It really takes a while to build up the depth of color values that I like to get to in my paintings. And often I have to layer things, you know, around 3, sometimes 4 times, depends, to really get to a dark color that I want to get to. So for these leaves, I'm going to go back to my mixture here of sap green and Veridian green. And I want to get to a really dark color here. And real quick, I'm just going to check how we're doing on time. Got 15 minutes. Cool.
Feel free to run past it, Shealeen, if you need a couple extra minutes. We'll be
Okay,
fine.
so I'm going to drop this color here. I'm going to start up at the top and I want to drop this darker mixture of sap green and Veridian green on the bottom side of this leaf here. And I'm going to drop a little bit more along the center vein here of this leaf over here on the left side. I think I'm going to actually drop a little bit of this same mixture around this flower. And I'm using my small brush to do this. So let's maybe make it look like there's some dimension from between this leaf and this flower. See how that kind of already makes it look like it's popping off the page just a little bit? You can use your medium-sized brush. That's what I'm using here. And I'm going to smooth that color out just a little bit. Make it look a little more natural. Squinting at it. I have 3 brushes in my hand right now. I feel like a ninja. I'm going to add a little bit more depth to some of those veins. Actually, I'm really liking how this is feeling. This leaf is very important to me. I feel like, I don't know, I guess I would say the strawberries are obviously the focal point, but I think that this leaf specifically is very important. I feel like it adds a lot of personality to this painting, especially with the little flower. So I'm using one brush to drop color, one brush to smooth. So right now I'm just smoothing. These little bits of paint that I dropped are a little bit too dramatic. So I just like to kind of smooth it out a little bit, help it look a little bit more soft and natural. Just smoothing right now. I think I want to drop a little bit of that same color here. These tips just a little bit. And that feels good. So I'll leave that one be for now. I'm going to go over to my other leaf using my small brush. Same thing. So I'm going to drop a little bit of extra color. Basically, every time I add layers, I use a little bit less, like I cover a little bit less of the leaf. So you can tell that the layer before I added a lot of green to this. This time I'm going to use less. I'm going to use my medium-sized brush. Smooth it out. I'm going to drop a little bit of that dark green and just some of these little tips. And then I'll smooth that out as well using my medium brush. I generally find that as I paint, I'll usually start my paintings with larger brushes, and then the brushes tend to get smaller and smaller. And that's not a hard and fast rule. And I definitely, don't hold me to that. But in general, that is kind of the sequence, because I'm going from covering a lot of ground to less and less and less and a little bit more detailed work. So if you ever aren't sure what brush to use, just kind of look at where you are in the painting and maybe that'll help you decide. Okay, so let's see here. I'm going to check on my strawberries, see if they're ready for the next layer. I don't want to paint on them while they're still wet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on a couple other things. I am going to get that same color of, I'm just going to use that same color of green that I've been using. And I am going to add some little seeds to my tiny little strawberry here. So use your smallest brush here. So use your tiniest point, and I want you to just draw some little seeds on the face of this strawberry. You don't need to overthink it. Just a couple little seeds will do the job. And then we'll let that dry. Now I want to mix something for our flower. So I want you to take a little bit of Veridian green, just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, and then a little bit of cadmium red. So Veridian green and cadmium red. And when you mix those two together, it should create kind of a grayish color. Okay. So you see that right there? Veridian green and cadmium red. And it's just a little bit of like a blue-gray color. So I want you to do a really watery mixture here. Make sure there's a lot of water in your mix. And we are going to just very carefully accentuate a little bit of the form of this flower. So this flower here, it's kind of, I don't know, there's not a lot going on with it right now. It's just kind of a white flower. So we're going to add just a little bit of this grayish mixture in between petals. That's going to help to create a little bit of dimension. It's going to help kind of lift it so it doesn't look quite so flat. So kind of just focus on, in between the petals. So maybe there's a little bit of a look of like shadow from one to the next. Hold on one second. I'm trying to fix my headphones here. Okay, now I'm going to smooth that out just a little bit. All right. So I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to go back to this green mixture here. Sap green and Veridian green, a really dark mixture. And I'm using my smallest brush. And now what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of this rich dark green to these leaves. And I don't want to cover them. I still want there to be like light green in there. This part doesn't have to be overthought. It's you can be a little like really loose with it, but just try not to just cover what you've already painted, but just add these little like wisps of a darker green. Okay. And notice how that just kind of helps to create a little bit more dimension. All right. Same thing on this one. I'm going to add a little bit more of a dark green to the stem. Just a little bit. I love moments of detail like this. Like it's such a small thing, but when you see just this dark, dark green stem behind this, part of a lighter leaf, it really helps to create like a new plane, like it helps to push this back and it brings this leaf forward, just like adding this darker green, just around this flower, that helps to bring that flower close. So it feels like that flower is the closest thing to us. Hopefully that all makes sense. Okay, so the last thing we need to do, we need to finish these strawberries. So we still got a couple minutes here. Mine is taking a really long time to dry here at the bottom, which is kind of annoying. It's annoying when you have a timed class and you got to finish it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just lift that up. And here's a little hack. I'm just going to go back to this alizarin crimson mixture and I'm going to do kind of this almost like they call it like a dry brush technique. So I'm just loading my brush up with paint here and not a lot of water, mostly paint. And I'm going to drop this really heavily pigmented mixture here. Add a little bit more cadmium right there. And I'm just dropping it in there. And all of its rich, heavily pigmented beauty. There you go. I'll do the same thing over here, just add a little bit more. And so when you don't use a lot of water, your paint dries fast. So the more water, you probably notice, like if you have a really heavily watery puddle, if you have a heavily, it's going to take a long time to dry on your palette. But if you're not using a lot of water, it can dry in like 5 seconds. Okay. Now I'm going to smooth that out just ever so slightly. Okay. Now I have one other detail I want to do before I finish up our strawberries. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I want you to grab some cadmium red. Need a little more water. So grab some cadmium red and a little bit of lemon yellow. So what I want to do is create like a really, really nice orange color. So lemon yellow and cadmium red, okay? And then take that color, I'm using my smallest brush, and you should find that your flower is dry. And I want you to draw these little stamen and just go ahead and drop them in around that center kind of green bit that we painted earlier. And if your flower's still wet, you can just wait to do that for a little bit. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to set these brushes aside. Let me go ahead and rinse them off real quick. All right, so use your smallest brush here. And if you have the ink, like I do, grab that. If you have gouache, grab that. If you have like a white pen, you can grab that. You could even use acrylic white if you have that. Whatever you can find. And if you don't, you can come back to this later. So I'm going to go ahead and shake this up. And I get this open real quick. All right, so I'm going to use my smallest brush here, the size 2. And just a note here, because this is not watercolor, it's ink, you do need to wash your brush right away after you finish using this. You don't want to let it just sit. Like you can let watercolor brushes that have watercolor in them, you can let them sit for hours and it doesn't really matter. At least I don't think it really matters. But with acrylic ink or with ink, you do need to wash it. So take this paint and let's just draw these little seeds on your strawberry. And Tim, is it okay if we go over a little bit? I haven't gone over in a while, but I think we'll have
Perfectly
to.
fine. Go right ahead.
Also, I can't hear you if you're talking for some reason, but you nodded, so we're good. Okay. Okay. There you go. Doesn't it look great already? I love how that looks. It's like the cherry on top. The cherry on top of the strawberry. And so go ahead and do the same thing on our big strawberry. And I'm not really like working in some sort of like pattern. I'm kind of just dropping them here and there. If you want to get really structured with it, you definitely can, do like a row and then another row, but not my style. And this paint here is still a little bit wet, so I'm not going to mess with that too much. I want to let that dry and then I can come back and add a bit more. Here's a dry spot. Okay, so once you did that, I'm going to clean off my brush right away. And then we have one more detail to do. I'm going to grab a little bit more red, this alizarin crimson mixture. And this is a fun part. So take that small brush that you have, and I want you to just kind of drop a little bit of color just to the right of each of those little seeds. And see how that just kind of brings it to life. Oh, I love it. That's so much fun.
Shealeen is doing that. Just let everybody know if you want to save the chat right now, I would go ahead and do that. Just click on the 3 little dots on the bottom of the chat window and hit save, and that'll give you the file saved for you to go back and reference in the future for the class. You need to go back to it.
All right, 1 second. Hey, Tim, I'm not sure I think you were just talking, but for some reason I just can't hear it. So I don't know. Hey, Raphael. All right, everybody. I think that that's a good place to stop for today. So hopefully you enjoyed. And Tim, can I show the iris class for next time? Okay. So we don't have this class completely planned out quite yet, but our hope is that for next class, which will be in June, we're going to do an iris. Hold on 1 second. There it is. I'll hold it like, okay. There you go. So this is what is going to be potentially our next class. It'll be a little bit different than this, but this is generally what you can expect. And that's going to be such a fun class. I'm looking forward to that. I've been on such an iris kick lately. So thank you all so much for joining. And it's always an honor to get to teach you to paint. So thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us.